Hello lovely people. This week we are taking a small break from all things bookish to talk about all the other things I love, also known as a favourites video.
Sophie Vlogs.
It's been quite a while since I've done one of these. I've liked a whole bunch of stuff in that time, but I'm here to talk to you about what I've liked most recently of all. I'm going to start off with two, I was going to say beauty favourites. They're sort of like, yeah, I guess you can count them as beauty. It's Lush stuff, essentially. So, first up we have Vanillary, which is my new smell because it smells amazing. It's vanilla, jasmine, and tonka, and I swear to God, this is what I want to smell like forever. Most of my other favourite perfumes have all been like stonkingly expensive, you know, like you smell them and you're like, oh, this is incredible, and then you look at the price tag and you're like, oh God, I can never wear you because money. Whereas this one, kind of affordable, so that's great. After that is this little bad boy, which is a shampoo bar, also from Lush. This is Jason and the Argan Oil, and first of all, I cannot resist me any form of loose Greek pun. I was already sold. And then, oh God, if I could smell-o-vision this to you, it smells like their rose shower gel. If you know rose jam, that's what this smells like. And that rose smell is like my favourite smell that they do. If they did that as a perfume, I think I would buy that. But they also had another one which was really gorgeous, which was Lady Godiva, but then just my overwhelming love for the flippin' rose just overtook me, and I had to get this one. I'm trying to use less plastic. The environment stresses me out, and I'm trying to do my bit, and one of the most effective ways I can think to do that is just to use less plastic. So I am trial running Shampoo Bar. I've only used it once so far, but that was perfectly fine. Although someone on Tumblr did tell me that I had to make sure I patted it dry, otherwise I'd come back to find it had turned into a slushy mess. So that was also very good to know, because otherwise that would have happened and I'd have been very sad. So those are two little beauty-esque things that I've been liking recently. Next up is a music favourite, and it's something which a lot of other people have been talking about because it's flipping great, but that's Rainbow by Kesha, because I am so here for Kesha being happy in her life and making great music as a result. I personally like the first half of the album more than I think I like the second half of the album. Maybe that's just because I got really flippin' overexcited during that spell. I really like the duet with Dolly Parton. I really like the stuff with Eagles of Death Metal. I really like Praying, makes me want to cry every time I hear it. I just want to weep with emotion. And it's all great, and I'm so here for it. After that is a mixture of a place and event favourite. So here in the UK we have an August bank holiday, and I use my August bank holiday to go to Manchester for Manchester Pride. I have some friends who live in Manchester, so I stayed with them. It was so good, if not also very intense and overwhelming, because I've gone to Bristol Pride the last couple of years. But this was Manchester Pride is the biggest Pride I've been to, and at times I was mildly overwhelmed by the sheer amount of people I was touching. You know, like you're just walking through a crowd and a lot of people are touching you, not inappropriately, that you're just having contact with a lot of strangers. That sometimes gets me. But oh God, it was so good. The parade was great, but also a bit weird sometimes because you have like these really great organisations, like you have Mermaids, you have Amnesty, you have all this stuff like going through with their stuff, and then suddenly you have like a massive like Tesco float, and then you're just like, oh, hello Tesco, and then like another charity comes past and all stuff like this. That was a bit weird, but also very cool. I just had a great time. I have this habit of on nights out making friends with people by smothering them in glitter, which if you're at Pride is a great way to bond with people. So I met a lot of new people that way. I took a lot of selfies with new people that way, who I will probably never see again, but who have my face on their phone for as long as they choose to keep it. So that was great. Moving slightly away from actually the Pride Festival itself, I also really enjoyed Manchester as a place. I went to the People's History Museum, which I cannot recommend enough. It was so interesting. I went because they had or they might still have, depending how quickly editing Sophie uploads this, but they had a temporary exhibition which is all about LGBT history, which was so great because just stuff like, for example, I've just finished reading the Reverend Richard Cole's autobiography, and they had lots of stuff there about Bronski Beat and all stuff like that. So I was like, oh, this is stuff I've read about quite recently. And then as well as that, they had a lot of, it was a really good exhibition. They had, one of my bits that I liked was they had this wall which had lots of like definitions on it, and it was like, if you didn't know what they would mean, you could turn them over and find out what they mean. But then they also had like a book underneath it which you could write stuff that you thought was missing from there in it. So that was really good because it meant that people whose identities and stuff had not been included on this board were still able to express that and to educate other people because they were able to write this in the book, and then people like me could flick through and be like, yes, cool stuff, good stuff, didn't know about that, that's good to know, ha ha ha, stuff like that. The permanent exhibitions they had were also really interesting. Specifically, I really like banners, like a good historical banner, or just any historical banner I find very interesting, apart from like awful ones from bad organisations. But you know, like, so they had some banners from LGBT marches, they had some banners from like workers' rights marches, they had all these very interesting banners which I was a particular fan of. Bouncing off of that, I have sort of two clothing favourites which are kind of directly related to Manchester in some way. So, and they're also directly related to my love of glitter. I'm a walking cliche. First of all, we have this skirt. Hello. Which I wore to Manchester Pride. Could you tell why? Because it's covered in sequins. I love this skirt so much. It's from Joni Clothing. I'll leave a link to them in the description below. They do really nice, like, retro vintage inspired clothing for the modern woman, which is like a clothing style that I want to wear more of, but also am hesitant because I don't buy so many new clothes anymore. It's like a turning point in my life. However, that was on sale, and I got it for like half the price, and I was thrilled. Which leads me on to something that was not on sale, but which is also sparkly, and I loved it. I got this in Manchester, and it's this beautiful bag. Can we talk about this bag? I'm sorry, I lose my shit every time. I just keep staring at it because it's so fucking beautiful. This is from Collectif, which is Collectif with an F, which I've mentioned before because I have a really nice like tartany vintagey dress from them as well. So they're turning out to be quite a fave. And I got it from, I think Thunder Egg was the name of the shop. I think they're thunderegg.co.uk online, which also do a lot of Joni Clothing style-esque, so like Lindy Bop stuff they sell, like that sort of thing. Super duper cute, super lovely. And this was just crying out for me to own it. So I now do. And it brings me such joy. Finally, I'm going to end on two things which are sort of related to each other, and that is a YouTube channel and a podcast. The YouTube channel is Chainsaw Suit Originals, I think, but the specific like series on it that I want to talk about is Movies with Mikey. Movies with Mikey is super duper interesting. Mikey talks about movies, but like with such insight and with such knowledge and with such like fun and humour, but also like serving out all the real talk about stuff. Can you tell that this means that I don't actually know anything technical about film, but it's super interesting to learn. So I'll leave a link to a couple of my favourite episodes below, but I've been listening to it, I listen to a lot of stuff while I work at work, and Movies with Mikey is something which every now and then, if I'm doing something a little bit mindless, I like to like put on, because most of my attention can go on that and learn all these interesting things. So I cannot recommend it enough. If you in any way like films, just go check it out, see if he's talked about a film that you are a fan of, and he will probably make you see it in a whole new light, and it'll be great. Related to that, the podcast also has Mikey in it. The podcast is called Crimea Riverdale. It's a Riverdale podcast. Mikey and his friend, whose name I've currently blanked because there's a camera recording me. Oh, crap. Let's just skim over that. The two of them just are going through Riverdale, talking about Riverdale. I'm only halfway through the podcast at the moment. I can't remember if they've actually finished it or not, but they they stopped watching the show halfway through while it was airing week by week, so then they could record the podcast from the beginning and not know how it ended. So where I am at, they've just started to reach territory where they don't actually know what happens next. And it's super duper interesting. A, it's very entertaining, it's very funny. B, it's really cool to like hear people's workings as they're trying to figure out what's happened, what's going on. And C, they have all of these great like running things. Like they have this running meter whereby every time Betty's mum does something that's ridiculously awful, she loses a point. And they've got this tally to see if she's ever gonna make it past 0. She's currently on -4. Just like it's very entertaining, it's very amusing, it's another one I like to listen to when I'm at work. On top of previous recommendations, if you haven't seen those videos, also include Witch Please podcast, Buffering the Vampire Slayer podcast. Those two, also super great. They're like my triumvirate at the moment. Throw in, I'm going to extend the podcast recommendations actually. I lied when I said I had 2 left. So I'm just going to tack 2 more podcast recommendations onto the end of here, which are not by the people I've talked about previously, new podcasts. First one is called One Good Thing. They take a movie that is not a very good movie, they watch it, and then they have to find one good thing about it, and then the rest of the podcast can just be completely talking about why it's such a bad film. And they're very funny, it's highly entertaining, and also on one of their episodes, their opening riff was a skit on my podcast's opening riff, which was ridiculously weird, but also pretty cool, and thanks, guys, for listening. Okay, final podcast recommendation, final recommendation of the whole thing, I'll shut up in a minute. That is Killing Your Darlings, which is Matt and Kristen. They also talk about films. I'm really enjoying film podcasts at the moment, guys. Killing Your Darlings is based on the concept of rewatching films that you liked as a child and assessing whether or not they're actually good. Some of them are not. Some of them unexpected gems. For example, it was so validating to listen to their Fern Gully episode because I loved Fern Gully, and it turns out that Fern Gully holds up. That makes me happy, and also thinking about Tim Curry's horrible little monster in it makes me scared. So there's that. That's it. I feel like I've whizzed through, but I feel like if I stopped and chatted too much, then this could get redonkulously long. Those are my favourites for whatever month I've actually uploaded this in. Gonna say September, could be October. We don't know. Okay, I hope it's September. Please let me know what you've been loving recently. One of my favourite things about watching favourites videos, is getting all these lovely recommendations. So please do recommend me lots of stuff in the comments below. Or if you also like any of these things and listen/watch/consume them, that will just let me know. Just have a little chat. I'm gonna go now. I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will see you next week.